Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Ryan Wormeli, joined on this Thursday morning here in Week 10 by Pat Fitzmaurice and by Andrew Erickson. Fellas, it's our starts and sits, and are we starting or sitting waiver ads and touchdown calls? We do a little bit of everything on this Thursday show. It's one of the fun ones of the week, so we are going to jump right in because we have a lot to get to. Just a quick reminder for everybody, all of our weekly consensus rankings and tiers can be found at fantasypros.com/rankings. Guys, we always start off with the waiver wire ads of the week, and are we sitting them right away, or are these guys that we just added to be on our benches here right off the bat? Quentin Johnston, he's been in this section before this year. I will say too, and Fitz, you do a ton of work on the waiver wire show early in the week, and the kind of the really comprehensive article that you, Debro, and Bo McBrayer put together each week. So maybe you will disagree with me. I found it really difficult to come up with names for this section this week. I felt like there was not a lot of options that you would even really want to put a lot of effort into starting this week. It was a lot of maybe pick up some running backs that are more handcuffs for down the line, receivers that I'm not really sure we're going to want to start anyway. So did you, before we even answer questions about these guys, and again, Quentin Johnston's the first name we're talking about, did you also kind of feel like there weren't that many names to choose from?
Yes. At the top of every waiver article we assign that week's waiver crop a grade. It has been a D grade for the last 2 weeks. There is no one to get. Running backs aren't getting hurt. So no one from the backup ranks is ascending into greater roles. And at wide receiver, we are getting a wave of injuries, but it's always hard you're never going to find a star wide receiver on waivers. It just doesn't happen. You're getting Band-Aids. That's it. And here we have a couple Band-Aids to talk about.
All right, well, let's talk about that first one, Quentin Johnston. Again, he's somebody who has been on this in this section before. When we talk about these waiver wire pickups, the fact that he still is eligible for this section kind of tells you, about how consistent or lack thereof he's been. So Fitz, week 10, are you interested in starting Quentin Johnston?
Well, it's a boomer bust profile. Quentin Johnston hasn't had more than 6 targets in any game this season, but it is encouraging that QJ's catch rate is 66.7% this year, 10 percentage points higher than it was last year when he had all sorts of troubles with drops. He's had some big plays, and that is the appeal here. Granted, he has benefited from a few busted coverages at times, but 4 touchdowns in 6 games. We are seeing glimpses of that freakish combination of size and athleticism. He is a load to deal with after the catch. So that's what you're hoping for. I have him ranked wide receiver 37 this week. So Chargers passing game has kind of been cooking. We'll talk about that a little later in the show, but I think you kind of can start him if you are in jeopardy of wide receiver this week because of all the bye weeks and injuries.
Erickson, Johnston is coming off his first 100-yard game of his career. He had 118 yards and a touchdown. Last year, I think he only topped 50 once, and he only got up to 90, I think it was. And then, obviously this year he's had a couple of games with a couple of touchdowns, but not the huge yardage total. So this has really been an outlier relative to his career, what we saw last week.
I mean, I'm not playing Quentin Johnston because I'm not betting on another busted coverage. That's where all of his big games have come from. It's been busted coverages where he's wide open for long touchdown plays. So the matchup's not that great. Titans are top 5 against wide receivers this season. So what did he do after his big game in week 2? Nothing for a long time. And then we didn't see him pop up till this last week. So to me, this feels very box score chasey, in my opinion. He had the big touchdown last weekend on a busted coverage. So he's outside my top 50. And I'll let someone else play Quentin Johnston. So Fitz, you want to play him against me? Be right. Be my guest.
So the other guys, I'll kind of put these names together because obviously they're similar situations. Xavier, Legette, and Jalen Coker. There was some interest, with Coker really the last couple of weeks. Didn't really pan out in terms of if you started him last week. Still pretty available in a lot of leagues. Similar situation with Legette, who's looked good at times. Also had some banged up issues. So Fitz, what's your approach for this week and beyond with the Panthers guys?
So I've got Legette ranked wide receiver 38, 1 spot behind Quentin Johnston. I've got Coker ranked wide receiver 45. You could actually make a case for putting Coker higher, which seems counterintuitive since Coker was an undrafted free agent and Legette was a first-round pick. But Coker is the slot guy. And it's worth remembering that last year, like going into the week of Thanksgiving, I think Adam Thielen was top 10, maybe even like wide receiver 6 in PPR fantasy points per game as the primary slot guy for Bryce Young. So there is some appeal with Coker. I think you could play either this week. If you're in a bind, since the target outlook seems pretty good, assuming Adam Thielen does not come back. Thielen was not practicing as of Wednesday. It doesn't seem like this will be the week when he returns from his hamstring issue. But interesting, like the matchup against the Giants looks kind of good on paper. The Giants haven't allowed a 100-yard game to a wide receiver all season, and they've gone up against Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, DK Metcalf, George Pickens, Amari Cooper, and Terry McLaurin twice. Have not allowed a single 100-yard receiving game to a wide receiver. Not to say that they're a bad matchup, though. They have given up some touchdowns. McLaurin had 2 against them last week. CeeDee Lamb had 98 yards and a TD against them. Amari Cooper, 2 touchdowns against them. So I think you could play either of these guys for the Panthers if you're in a pinch.
Erickson, what do you think? And it's worth keeping in mind. I mean, Fitz mentioned like kind of if you're in a bind, there are 4 teams on bye. It's the Browns. They have a couple of receivers, primarily Cedric Tillman. All the Packers guys, the Raiders, Jacoby Myers, all the Seahawks guys. There are a lot of receivers on bye this week.
I like both Panthers receivers more than Johnston. If I had to make a choice between the 3 guys that we're talking about, Coker last week came very, very close to scoring a touchdown. So I know that he was disappointing after kind of building up the hype for him. I think maybe, hey, sometimes we're a week too early on some of these players. And with Coker, I think that Fitz outlines it really well, where he's the separator in this offense. They moved away from Jonathan Mingo. Adam Thielen's still not healthy. So if they're looking for someone to get open, I mean, even on his limited opportunities last week, he still looked good. And Bryce Young missed him deep on one of his deep attempts. So if he hits him, he's catching a long touchdown pass. And where the Giants have been weak in their secondary has been against the deep ball. Deontay Banks can't cover both guys, and he's the guy that they kind of shadow the number 1. That's probably going to be Legette in this particular matchup. Now, Banks necessarily is he's one of those corners that shadows everybody, but then it's like, is this actually it's not necessarily a bad thing that he's shadowing the number 1s, because he's been very up and down as well. So I like both Panthers receivers here. I think that Legette is a guy that has monster red zone equity. And when I was rewatching that Panthers game last week, it seems like on every single play they're motioning him. So to me, that's Canales, hey, how can I get the ball in Legette's hands? So I think Coker can win downfield with separation. Legette more scheme touches. So I like both of those guys over QJ this week.
We did sort of gloss over the one concern here, although Erickson touched on it briefly. It's Bryce Young. The fact that Coker did get missed by Bryce Young on what should have been a big play.
Well, I will say on the other 2 deep balls, he hit Legette right in the hands and somehow it got intercepted. And then the other one was a dime to David Moore, who just dropped
that. That interception was one of the better throws of Bryce Young's.
I looked up and it said, wait, that got intercepted? How did that happen? Yeah. So again, he was 2 for 3. Of course, the one that he missed was to Coker, and David Moore just dropped. I mean, as long as David Moore just doesn't get any targets, then that's what they need to do. Just move away from David Moore in the Panthers offense, focus on Legette, focus on Coker. I think those guys can be productive against the Giants.
All right, let's go to the next section of the show. Plant your flag, Fitz. Who is the player that you are planting your flag on this week that you really have conviction in and believe in for week 10?
Jaylen Waddle. And we had Jacob Gibbs of CBS on our ranking shows this week, and he made some great points about Waddle. Like what a terrific prospect was. Jaylen Waddle had the highest yards per route run in college since 2020, ahead of guys like Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Devontae Smith. Waddle was the 6th overall draft pick in 2021. He is 3 for 3 in giving us 1,000-yard seasons to begin his NFL career. The Miami passing game was obviously just broken when Tua was out. Couldn't get anything going with Skylar Thompson or Tyler Huntley. Tyreek Hill couldn't do anything either. Of the other 4 games that the Dolphins have played with Tua, 2 were against the Bills, who have one of the very lowest wide receiver target rates in the league and one of the highest running back target rates in the league. That was the case for the Bills last year, too. Sean McDermott's defenses are good at shutting down outside receivers. The other was against the Cardinals, whose defense has the lowest first read target rate in the league. The Cardinals also have one of the lowest box rates in the league. Basically, they are trying to force you to get the ball to your running backs and just take away the receivers from you. So, and that 4th game with Tua, Jaylen Waddle had 5 catches for 109 yards. That was back in week 1. So don't overthink it. Waddle is still a terrific player. Get him in your lineup against a Rams defense that has allowed the 8th most fantasy points to receivers.
Erickson, I'm not even going to ask you to weigh in on Waddle because everybody who's listened to this show this year knows how you feel about it.
I think that we just need to put a little bit more perspective, and Fitz did a great job outlining it. But what if this was just week 3, right? Tua, this is his 3rd game back. Would we be panicking after 2 bad weeks from Jaylen Waddle? One of them was against the Bills, who every single time they played the Dolphins, they shut them out, basically. No, we would be Rams. This is the ultimate buy low spot blow up game for Jaylen Waddle. Look at all the blow up receivers that have had against the Rams. And they all start with Jameson Williams, Jauan Jennings, Jackson Smith and Jigba. And look who's next, Jaylen Waddle. You can't make this stuff up, guys.
All right, who are you planting your flag on? That isn't Jaylen Waddle.
That isn't Jaylen Waddle. Amari Cooper. This is the eruption spot for Mr. Amari Cooper. Look, talk about him all year. It's a roller coaster. Sometimes he gets outside the top 100. Other times he's a top 12 wide receiver. So we've seen a little bit of both in his limited time with the Buffalo Bills. He was wide receiver 12 in his first game with the Bills. And then I think he finished outside the top 100 in his second game, missed last week with a wrist injury. But looks like he's going to play. Keon Coleman, though, looks unlikely to play in this matchup. And I'm just going to chase that first game that we saw with the Bills and Amari Cooper, where he was being hyper targeted nearly on 50% of his routes run. And a lot of those came when Keon Coleman was not on the field. So if Coleman misses this game entirely, I think this is a spot where Cooper can eat. They're playing in the dome against Indianapolis Colts. We like to attack with perimeter cornerbacks, with perimeter wide receivers. So look, it's always a roller coaster ride with Amari Cooper, and it's hard to project the big blow up spots, but no one is going to be surprised when Amari Cooper blows up. So you just got to make sure he's in your lineup and not on your bench this week.
Fitz, what do you think about Cooper?
Yeah, I like him. Although, are we getting the blow-up game and a road game, Erickson? Isn't it usually a home game for Amari Cooper?
The splits seem to change every single year with him. He does it in this particular split for this year, it's games that are 50 degrees or warmer. It's just always inconsistent no matter way you slice it.
Yeah, Amari's a volatile asset, but yeah, we're waiting for. Well, we got that good first game from him. With the Bills, where he didn't even play that many snaps and had 4 catches for 66 and a touchdown. So, it's just this is the reason we were excited to get Amari Cooper the heck out of Cleveland and away from Deshaun Watson and pair him up with Josh Allen. And now we're doing that in a pretty good matchup against the Colts. So yeah, I'm on board.
The NFL season is rolling along and the contenders are separating from the pack. The one thing that hasn't changed this season, DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, is the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Fade to the corner of the end zone, running back breaks through the line and gallops 60 yards to score. We don't care how they get them. We just want to bet on touchdowns, and DraftKings is the best place to do it. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like a player scoring a touchdown. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. Best game on the Week 10 slate is Detroit-Houston. Looks like the Texans might be getting Nico Collins back for that one, while the Lions get Jameson Williams back too. Lions are laying a field goal in Houston for that one. Another surprisingly fun game, Steelers-Commanders. Washington was laying 2.5 points at home early in the week. And of course, the biggest total of the week is obviously Ravens-Bengals on Thursday Night Football. Might have already happened by the time you're listening to this podcast. That one's in Baltimore. The line opened at a whopping 53 points. Odds and lines subject to change, of course. Whichever game you bet, here's a reason for new customers to do a touchdown dance on their own. Bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code FantasyPros. That's code FantasyPros for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. All right, fellas, let's go into our player debates here, start or sit. We're going to start with the running backs, and we're actually going to start with a player that we need to talk about a little bit beyond just the start or sit decision, because I put this together yesterday. Chuba Hubbard versus Najee Harris. Chuba Hubbard is now a whole lot richer as of this morning. He signs a major extension for a running back, at least major, with Carolina. 4 years, $33 million. This is a team that invested a second-round pick in a running back, in an injured running back, just earlier this year in April. They're now extending a player that I think a lot of people expected to be a kind of capable fill-in and somebody who kind of just fills in until Brooks is healthy and ready to seize that role. Doesn't look like that anymore. Fitz, what was your reaction to hearing about this extension, first of all?
Yeah, I mean, Chuba deserves it. He's had a terrific season, and I think a lot of people have gone overboard in the fantasy community as far as thinking like Jonathan Brooks was going to be some sort of panacea for this year. And really, like, there is just no incentive for the Panthers to give Brooks a lot of work for the rest of 2024 because he's coming off this major knee injury. The Panthers are going nowhere, and Chuba has been playing really well. So, like, they're setting this up to be a 1-2 punch in future years, which is smart. Like, you need two running backs in the NFL. Like, we're not seeing a lot of running back injuries this year, but normally the injury rate's pretty high. It's just kind of crazy to give a running back consistently like 75% snap shares and 25 touches a game, unless his name's Derrick Henry. So, I think it's terrific. And I think this kind of validates Chuba going forward. Like, his value is not going to evaporate now that Jonathan Brooks is back. And I don't think Jonathan Brooks really has any value in redraft leagues for 2024.
Fitz, quickly, what about for Dynasty? Because we just talked earlier this week on our monthly Dynasty Discord show, which I encourage everybody to check out the first Tuesday of every month. We talked about how Jonathan Brooks was kind of sitting in terms of value amongst the running backs amongst a lot of veterans. I think, the way we had it in our updated Dynasty trade value chart, it was guys like Joe Mixon and Derrick Henry and Christian McCaffrey kind of sandwiching Jonathan Brooks. Do you think Brooks needs to move down with news like this?
A little bit, yes. Still a terrific prospect, but now he is not going to walk into a featured role automatically. Like, he would have to significantly outplay Chuba Hubbard to earn a featured role. Otherwise, he is a 50-50 back.
Yeah. All right, Erickson, what do you think about this actual debate? Chuba Hubbard, fresh off the extension against Najee Harris here in week 10.
I'm going to go with Chuba Hubbard. Look, man, they paid him. They're going to use him. We have no idea what Brooks' role, if he's going to play. Canales has been very non-committal about, he's activated, but will he have a role on offense? And if he has a role, well, isn't that just taking whatever snaps Miles Sanders has been getting? That's the way I kind of see it. So I don't see Hubbard's role really changing at all. I think that the matchup is fine against the New York Giants. I know they got Dexter Lawrence, but they've given up a lot of yardage at times to running backs. So Hubbard involved in the passing game, clear red zone role. It feels weird betting on all these Panthers players, but with all the teams on bye, they're playing the New York Giants. It's in Germany. It's a weird game. Weird things happen. So I'm just going to bet on a guy that's continued to produce. The team obviously knows that, and they paid him because he's been a producer. Whereas Najee Harris against the Commanders, I think, number one, Jaylen Warren is a way bigger threat than Jonathan Brooks is in this particular match. Jaylen Warren might actually be healthy for the first time all season coming off the bye week. So we've already seen this season Jaylen Warren outsnap Najee Harris when he's not even been 100% healthy. So they're underdogs. What if they're trailing in this game? Is Najee out there? We don't know. So I think that is one issue against Najee. And then number two, the Commanders' defense at home, third fewest points per game allowed. This defense is legit, especially when they play at home. So I know the Steelers' offenses look good with Russ, but I think this is more of a struggle fest. So whereas Panthers-Giants could get a little weird just because of all the other aspects between defenses I don't really trust. So I'm going to go with Chuba Hubbard.
Fitz, who do you prefer, Hubbard or Harris?
I do think it's close to a coin flip, but I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to go with Najee. So the Commanders lost defensive tackle Jonathan Allen a few weeks ago. He tore his pec. Allen was an important cog in their run defense, and in the last 2 weeks without Jonathan Allen, the Commanders have given up 366 rushing yards. The return of Warren from a knee injury really hasn't cut into Najee's workload that much. He's had 21 and 19 carries in his last 2 games with Warren back. Those are 2 of his biggest rushing totals of the year, and he's run for over 100 yards in 3 straight games. So I do like Chuba. He's had at least 17 touches in 7 straight games. Chuba's had 6 touchdowns over his last 7 games. There is a lot to like here, but we don't know. Again, Erickson said it. Jonathan Brooks, his usage is a wild card. I don't think he's going to get like enough usage to have fantasy value, but he could get enough to poach a few of those touches from Chuba Hubbard. And if Bryce Young has a bad game, that could just totally short circuit the Panthers offense. So I'd like Najee just a little more here.
Quickly, Erickson, before we get off, Chuba, what do you think about him rest of the season? Obviously, I asked, Fitz in terms of dynasty, but in terms of his rest of season ranking, he currently sits at RB21. That was, people haven't had time to react to the news yet and possibly move him up if they want to. As a result of this, where do you think he winds up?
I mean, I think that he'll probably still stay in that range. There's always the caveat that is the Panthers offense, right? So you can never be too heavily invested. Even if it would not surprise me if he outproduces RB21 rest of the way, because he's obviously done that so far this year. And the Panthers have a pretty good schedule. I think that was one of the appealing parts about Jonathan Brooks, right? And holding on to him, thinking, looking at this playoff schedule, oh man, this guy could smash if he got the opportunity. And at least right now with a healthy Chuba Hubbard, that doesn't seem very, very likely. So yeah, I mean, if you held on to this point, again, now he's a hold. I don't think that he's someone you want to go and buy. But I think that if you held on to him, you couldn't trade him off, then you just keep him.
All right, let's go to our other running back debate. Austin Ekeler or Tank Bigsby? Erickson, I'll start with you this time. Who do you prefer between Ekeler and Bigsby in Week 10?
Well, it looks like Trevor Lawrence is probably not going to play this week, and they're playing the Vikings. So I would not try to play Jaguars backfield players. Etienne, they're good. I don't know how many points they're going to score offensively if Mac Jones is the quarterback. That's not a good look. So I'll just play Austin Ekeler. Good offense. I know the matchup is tough against Pittsburgh, but I just have more confidence the Commanders are going to be able to move the ball effectively, even if Ekeler and Brian Robinson is still kind of banged up. So I will go with Ekeler.
Fitz, what do you think?
Is Mac Jones really that big a downgrade from Trevor Lawrence, the way Lawrence has played this season?
Yeah,
he probably is.
Yes,
I'd ask the Patriots fan about that.
He is.
So, the wild card here, for sure it's Ekeler if Brian Robinson doesn't play. Robinson missed last week with a hamstring injury, got in a limited practice on Wednesday, but he said it's going to be dependent on how his hamstring feels before the game. So he is truly a game time decision. If Robinson's out, I will have Ekeler well ahead of Bigsby. As of now, I do have Bigsby just a little bit ahead. I might have to drop Bigsby a few spots. I think I'm still going to have him just ahead of Ekeler because Ekeler is... It's not even a two-man operation. They play Jeremy McNichols. Even if Robinson is out, they're going to play Jeremy McNichols and Chris Rodriguez too. So, yeah, terrible matchup. The Vikings are number one in DVOA against the run. They've allowed the fifth fewest fantasy points to running backs, but Bigsby is still the primary early down back for the Jags. They're probably going to lean on the run heavily if Lawrence doesn't play. Bigsby's averaging 5.5 yards per carry. He's been really good. But obviously the concern is that if Bigsby can't do business against the Vikings as a runner, he's not going to make it up as a pass catcher because he has 3 receptions all year. So I don't really like either of these guys. At desperate times might call for desperate measures. But both of these guys are just running back threes for me. Mid-range running back threes, low-end running back threes.
Let's look at some wide receivers here. Marvin Harrison Jr. or Khalil Shakir. These guys are back-to-back in ECR for the week, and that's in our half PPR rankings. Shakir is wide receiver 23. Marvin Harrison Jr. is wide receiver 24. Fitz, do you have a stronger preference here than in the last one, or do you also see this as kind of a toss-up?
Kind of a toss-up. I'm going with Shakir. And I had initially had Harrison ranked higher, but now I've got Shakir ranked higher. No Keon Coleman for the Bills this week. And over the last 3 weeks, Shakir has 22 catches for 222 yards. And when Josh Allen throws to him, Shakir catches it. He has 45 targets this year, 42 catches. That is a 93.3% catch rate. He's averaging 10.5 yards per target. That's who Khalil Shakir is. He is Mr. Efficiency. Marvin Harrison has been Mr. Erratic this season. He's had 200-yard games, 2 100-yard games, 5 touchdowns, but Marvin Harrison Jr. has also been held under 50 receiving yards in 6 of his 9 games this season. He's averaging 6.1 targets per game. We thought he was coming in to be the alpha receiver for the Cardinals. That has not been the case at all. He's only had double-digit targets once all year. And is he going to have one of his big games against the Jets? Against Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed, it seems unlikely.
Yeah, the production profiles from these guys so far this year couldn't be more different, really, when you look at them. So it's interesting that they're back-to-back in the rankings. By the way, our staff rankings do have Shakir a little bit higher than Harrison. He's dragged down a bit by his ranking from Erickson. So I'm assuming that you also prefer Shakir?
I don't think this is close, Fitz. Fitz, you laid out the argument for Shakir, but when you open with it being close, I was kind of shocked because to me, it's clear as day. It's Shakir. I don't think you have to play Harrison. I mean, what has he done that's shown, no, not a great matchup, super inconsistent. Look, I don't think that right now is the time you want to be playing Marvin Harrison Jr. It's a bad matchup. They're going to bye next week. I think that after the bye week, they'll get things together, but it's like the Jekyll and Hyde thing or Superman versus Bizarro, where Khalil Shakir is like the most efficient receiver for Buffalo, and then Marvin Harrison Jr. is on the total opposite of the spectrum, where he's been super inefficient with Kyler Murray. They're just not on the same page. They just don't have that chemistry. And in a bad matchup, I think this is an easy spot to, hey, I want to find an alternative to Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't think, again, the upside is always there with him because of the talent of the player, but he comes with a really, really shaky floor, and Shakir, I think, has a higher ceiling and floor this week.
So Erickson says that one is not close. Maybe the next one will be closer in his eyes. Josh Downs or DeAndre Hopkins. Do you see that one as closer, or does that also have a clear winner for you, Erickson?
This is a clear winner for me too. I think it's Josh Downs. I don't know. The DeAndre Hopkins thing, yes, obviously looked fantastic. He was playing the Buccaneers, one of the worst defenses in the NFL. So are we just going to, and then the other side of it, as Fitz astutely pointed out last week, the Vikings was a tough matchup, which is why Josh Downs wasn't great. Joe Flacco wasn't great. So I'm going right back to Josh Downs because I'm confident that the targets are going to be here for him. Where isn't Hopkins just going to get Surtain, one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL? I get that he's a winner that can win contested balls, but I don't necessarily see the Chiefs as, let's attack Surtain with DeAndre Hopkins all day. Like that should be our strategy against the Buccaneers and their banged up secondary. Makes total sense. But to me, this doesn't scream like a massive Hopkins game. So yes, super productive last week, but I think it was a lot to do with the specific matchup. So I don't like the matchup nearly as much. So I will go back to Josh Downs. I'm just more confident he's going to see the volume in a better matchup than he saw last week against the Minnesota Vikings.
I'm really curious to see what happens in the Chiefs-Broncos game because, and we're going to talk about this more on the Friday show with Debro Fitz, but I'm just like, the Chiefs offense was finally the version of itself that we kind of expected going into the year. It felt like for like maybe the first time this season last week, whereas the Broncos defense had their worst performance. Like they both kind of had outlier performances in opposite directions, the Denver defense in the KC offense. So I'm really curious kind of how that side of the matchup goes here in week 10. That'll be a really fascinating one for me. Fitz, as far as this question goes, DeAndre Hopkins, he's wide receiver 20 in our current ECR, and Josh Downs is wide receiver 21. So another one where they're back to back. Erickson doesn't think either of these were close. Do you think this one's close?
I do, and I'd rather play Hopkins. So he's the lead receiver now for the Chiefs. Like that is a lucrative gig. And Andy Reid said when Hopkins came over that Hopkins was going to go into that slot role that Rashid Rice had played, that Juju had played. That's been a pretty lucrative role in terms of fantasy. And if he is in that slot role, like, is he going to see Patrick Surtain Jr. on every snap? Like, does Surtain shadow in the slot? I don't know if he does. So it's possible that he's not running into the coverage of Patrick Surtain all the time. Some of the time, sure. But yeah, I mean, like D-Hop had the great game against the Buccaneers, and I realize it is the Buccaneers, but like that chemistry with Hopkins and Patrick Mahomes is only going to get stronger. The Broncos, yeah, they have allowed the seventh fewest fantasy points to wide receivers, but like I think Hopkins has 7 or 8 targets in his back pocket every week with upside for 10 or more. And Downs, granted, he does seem to have surpassed Michael Pittman as the lead receiver for the Colts. He's up against the Bills this week, and the Bills do seem to have more trouble with slot receivers than they do against outside receivers. Tyrone Johnson is giving up an 86% catch rate as the slot corner for the Bills and 1.48 yards per route run into his coverage. Those are not good numbers. So Downs can win this matchup, but I refuse to rank Downs as a star until he proves he's a star. Like, start racking up 100-yard games and scoring touchdowns. He hasn't done it yet. I want to see more from Josh Downs. And by the way, one guy who's proven that he is a star, DeAndre Hopkins. So I'm going to play the star over the working to be a star.
You had your crusade against Josh Downs last week, Fitz, on all of our shows, and how you thought he was overranked. And, 6 catches, 60 yards. You were, ultimately
it's okay.
Yeah, not the worst game he's ever had, but maybe shouldn't have been ranked in the top 20 at receiver. Obviously.
Better spot for him this week, though, no question.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I mean, yeah, we said it last week. That Vikings defense against Joe Flacco was extremely scary, and that's largely how it played out. So a better scenario this week. But either way, your hatred of Josh Downs continues. Guys, low testosterone affects about 30% of adult men in America. Are you feeling the drag of fatigue, noticing a dip in muscle mass, or sensing a slump in libido? If so, it's time to get your testosterone levels tested. If you have low T, Kysotrex is an FDA-approved pill that's changing the game in testosterone replacement therapy. In fact, Kysotrex restored testosterone levels in nearly 9 out of 10 clinical study participants, and its unique formulation bypasses the liver to avoid liver damage. It's time to break free from injections, pellets, and gels. Choose Kysotrex and take a step toward being the hero of your life again. To see if you qualify, visit Kysotrex.com and take the low T quiz today. That's KYZATREX.com. By prescription only. Kysotrex is a controlled substance and can be a target of abuse. Kysotrex is not for use in pregnant women or men with prostate or breast cancer. Safety and efficacy in those younger than 18 is not known. Tell your doctor about all medical conditions and medications. Serious side effects could include increased blood pressure, worsening prostate symptoms, increased risk of prostate cancer, blood clots in the legs or lungs, decreased sperm count, liver problems, enlarged or painful breasts, and breathing problems while you sleep. Common side effects include swelling of the ankles, feet, or body, increased red blood cell count, and increase in prostate-specific antigen or PSA levels. PSA is a test used to detect prostate cancer. Report these symptoms to your doctor. Call your doctor to learn more about Kysotrex. For questions or more information, visit www.kysotrex.com or call 1-833-949-5040. All right. Rapid fire start-sit decisions for the rest of the show. Running back Jaylen Warren. We talked a bit about Najee Harris earlier. Versus Travis Etienne. We talked a bit about Tank Bigsby earlier. So a couple of the secondary options here as it appears. Jaylen Warren, Travis Etienne, Fitz, who do you prefer?
Warren. Steelers run the ball at the second highest rate in the league. Warren has that dual run catch appeal. 14 touches 2 weeks ago, 11 touches last week. Snap shares the last 2 weeks have been 51% and 39%. So it is a split backfield, and it's an offense that runs through its running backs. Travis Etienne is just a passing down back now. I mean, he has been usurped by Tank Bigsby. Now, being a passing down back for a bad team isn't always the worst thing because you're going to be in some negative game scripts, and maybe that means high target and catch totals. But I don't think we can count on double-digit touches for Travis Etienne. And as Erickson said before, like if there's no Trevor Lawrence, I just kind of want to run away from this Jags offense.
Erickson?
Jaylen Warren for me. Just say no to Jags.
All right, that's an easy one. Wide receiver. This I thought was kind of interesting to throw these two against each other. DJ Moore or Rome Odunze. Odunze coming off that 100-yard game. DJ Moore had that weird instance where he walked off the field during a play. Has been largely disappointing considering the quarterback upgrade he got this offseason. So as of now, as we head into week 10, a couple of Bears receivers, DJ Moore, Rome Odunze. Erickson, who do you prefer?
I am afraid that we're going to get squeaky wheel game from DJ Moore because of all this drama, because I think that Odunze is playing better and you should probably play Odunze. I mean, look at DJ Moore. He has one top 30 finish this season. One time. He's been a top 30 receiver. I mean, the Patriots matchup is good, but if they're going to put Gonzalez on anybody, it would be on DJ Moore because he is the quote unquote alpha in this passing game. So I just like what I've seen from Odunze. It seems like he just has better chemistry with Caleb Williams. I think I have them ranked back to back. If it's my lineup, I'm going to just play Odunze. I'm going to roll out the rookie who has been flashing since the bye week and more, where it seems like he's really disgruntled. Maybe they feed him some targets, but where's the efficiency? It's been non-existent between him and Keenan Allen. Like they're seeing more targets than Odunze, but they're just not doing anything with them. So I have concerns. I think it is a coin flip. I think it's pretty close because you can just see these guys flip-flopping, but I'm just going to roll with the rookie.
With Keenan Allen struggling, do you think that it's worth playing both Moore and Odunze if you're in a spot where you need to, or would you try to pick between them?
I mean, those guys I've ranked much higher than Keenan Allen. I don't want to play Keenan Allen.
In ECR, for the record, DJ Moore, wide receiver 28, Rome Odunze, wide receiver 31, Keenan Allen, wide receiver 36. So it's not a massive gap, but he is behind the other two at this point. Fitz, what do you think, Moore or Odunze this week?
I'm behind consensus on both of these guys. I have DJ Moore one spot higher than Rome Odunze. So like Erickson, I have him back to back, but I have him flipped. And mainly that is because Moore has a track record that shows he is a terrific receiver. And Rome Odunze, his track record, he just kind of doesn't have one. He had a good game last week, but that was really his only good game of the year. It is clear, though, that DJ Moore is disgruntled. I don't know about that play where he walked off in the middle of it. He did step out of bounds, so maybe it also kind of looked like he turned his ankle. So, the fact that he was no longer eligible as a receiver, he was kind of like hobbling a little bit just for a minute. But there were some other things that make it pretty clear that he's disgruntled. There was this weird shoulder bump with Caleb Williams as Williams was like walking off the field and Moore was walking on. Didn't look like a friendly shoulder bump. And we know that DJ Moore was one of the most vocal supporters of Justin Fields in the Bears locker room. And Moore was interviewed on a Chicago sports radio station earlier this week. He was asked point blank if if Bears head coach Matt Eberflus has lost the locker room. His answer was, "I won't say no." That was his answer to that question. The vibes are not good with DJ Moore, and
they're not. I hate to say it, like as a fellow Terp, which he is, but like his body language has been awful for a while now.
Terrible, yeah. And the Bears are a sinking ship right now, man. I mean, how were they going to respond after losing on that Hail Mary 2 weeks ago? Well, they went out into the desert and got blown out by the Arizona Cardinals. And by the way, the Bears rest of season schedule. Hardest terrible. In the league in terms of DVOA. Yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised if the Bears drop this game at home to the Patriots. I wouldn't be surprised if they won like one more game all year. I mean, it pains me to say it as a Green Bay Packers fan. Oh, wait, it doesn't pain me to say it at all. I'm enjoying this. So just bad vibes. I really don't want to start either of these guys, but I guess I would start DJ Moore if faced with this choice.
Literally, as we were having this conversation, friend of the show, Matt Harmon, had a tweet that kind of points out Rome Odunze is leading the team in receiving yards, but it's only 391 yards halfway through the season. It's under 400 yards, and we're in week 10, and that's leading the team.
So much for setting up your rookie quarterback with this great trio of wide receivers. Yeah. Like Keenan Allen might be cooked. DJ Moore is unhappy. Rome Odunze hasn't popped yet. Man.
And yet, I think the job they did setting him up with the receivers is still better than the job they did setting him up with an offensive play caller.
The Bears
I didn't understand.
The Bears need to do what the Packers did with Romeo Doubs. They need to suspend him for a week and then reward him with targets, and then he'll just go off. Seemed to work for them.
All right, let's get to some flex start-sit decisions. How about this one, Fitz? Ladd McConkey or Brian Robinson Jr., assuming he's healthy in place?
Yeah, I like Ladd. Rock solid floor. Over his last 5 games, Ladd is averaging 5 catches and 66.2 receiving yards with at least 4 catches and 43 yards in every game during that stretch. And passing volume has been up for the Chargers lately. So I'll take him over Robinson with this tough matchup against the Steelers.
By the way, I didn't mention this when we were talking about Ekeler, but Brian Robinson Jr., if you look at our Are They Playing tool on FantasyPros.com, currently give him a 76% chance to play this week against the Steelers. So that tool and us behind it are somewhat optimistic about Robinson playing. Erickson, McConkey or Robinson?
Gonna hedge. PPR Ladd, half PPR Brian Robinson. And my flex, I checked. The flex rankings reflect this take of mine. So I think it matters because Brian Robinson, if he scores, you're playing him because of touchdowns. Like that's why you're playing him. But Ladd has that, especially in PPR, much higher floor.
Kind of feels like a cop out. So
I mean, it will help.
It's more information. It's helpful to the listeners, but you're kind of sitting on the fence here.
I can't lose.
All right, Jauan Jennings or Javonte Williams. I feel like it's impossible to avoid him because of where he's ranked every week, and it usually is a decision you have to make. But it does feel like we talk about Javonte a lot on this show, and I continue to feel like he actually kind of needs to be brought up, just again, given where he's ranked and the decisions people have to make who have him. So Fitz, this week, week 10, for like the 8th time, Javonte Williams or, in this case, Jauan Jennings.
And I often answer in favor of Javonte Williams, but not this week. I would rather play Jennings. The Chiefs are just a skull and crossbones matchup for running backs. They have allowed the fewest fantasy points to running backs by a pretty wide margin. And like Javonte, he's been under 50 rushing yards in 3 of his last 4 games, and he catches some passes, but usually not enough for him to salvage a good point total if he does not get home as a runner. So Jennings, meanwhile, is going to be in that Brandon Ayuk role as the primary downfield receiver for the 49ers. So far, only 36 targets, so kind of a small sample size, but Jennings is averaging 11.2 yards per target, 2.75 yards per route run. Those numbers are great. His average depth of target is 12.3 yards, so these are high-value targets. And Brock Purdy's been cooking lately. Give me Jennings.
Yeah, to your point on the Chiefs, I know that Derrick Henry was his first game with Baltimore, so maybe they were still just kind of learning the chemistry of each other and how that offense is going to work. He's having this like historic season, and it was by far his worst game. He barely had 10 points in half PPR, 13 carries, 46 yards. He did get a touchdown, which kind of saved his day, but it just speaks to how excellent and really superb that Chiefs defense is, that Henry's been this unbelievable league-winning monster, and even he couldn't do it against Kansas City. That was all the way back in week 1. Erickson, what do you think about this one? Jauan Jennings or Javonte Williams?
Jennings. Easy. I want that upside in the 49ers offense someone in this 49ers offense is going to pop because they're playing Tampa Bay. And I will take my shots with Pearsall, with Jennings, like any of these. Again, I don't know, but I'm willing to just throw it out there against Tampa Bay. Someone's going to pop.
How about Erickson, Raheem Mostert, or Xavier Worthy?
I'm going to go back to Xavier Worthy here. I get Hopkins had the monster game, but before that, we saw Worthy still see a lot of targets. Again, if he just stays in bounds, he scores a touchdown, right? And nobody's freaking out about him necessarily as much. So I like the speed element. Yeah, I'm going to go with Worthy. And Raheem Mostert keeps fumbling. So, and every time they give Jalen Wright the ball, he looks amazing. So I get that the matchup's pretty good for Miami against the Rams, but I don't know. I feel like Mostert's kind of falling out of favor a little bit. So I'm just going to roll the dice with Worthy.
Fitz, all 3 of us outscored Xavier Worthy in week 9. Are you willing to start him in week 10?
No, I don't want to start Xavier Worthy. Worm, you were just talking about that Thursday night season opener with the Chiefs versus the Ravens. Do you realize how many red herrings there were in that game? There was Derrick Henry needing touchdown deodorant to like salvage a decent game. Otherwise, it would have been a disaster. Xavier Worthy had 2 touchdowns in that game and got everyone all excited. Isaiah Likely had people throwing like 50 or 60% of their fab money at him after that game. Man, that was just like, that was such a misleading game from a fantasy standpoint. Yeah, like Worthy, what a disappointment this guy has been this season. And the run out for him could not have been any better. Like Hollywood Brown goes on IR before the season-ending injury. Rashee Rice, season-ending injury. Juju Smith-Schuster comes in, starts to get going, immediately goes down with a long-term injury. And yet we're still getting painfully little from Xavier Worthy. No thanks. Yes, Devon Etienne is the main man in the Miami backfield, but they still get Mostert 9 or 10 carries every week, and there's always a chance of a touchdown with him. I will take that over the utter lack of production from Xavier Worthy.
So you don't love, you just don't like Worthy. Is that in between this conversation? Because
I would love some sort of reason to like Xavier Worthy, but he's just not giving me one.
Yeah, I think I might change my answer. So I had this reflection. I was thinking about Worthy and someone I really liked. So trying to not be biased towards him because, again, very excited about him, but kind of felt this way. Marvin Mims last year. After he popped really early in the year, and then he just never got used. He never got going. And oh man,
I mean, again, Erickson, you and we have seen video evidence of your route running skills at play. You outscored Xavier Worthy in week 9. I don't think I've ever seen this before. If you look at the game log on Fantasy Pros, one of the columns is like where they finished. He finished as wide receiver 156 last week with his -1 point. I don't think I've ever seen a number that high on anybody's game log
because he had -10 rushing yards. Yeah. He's giving Jaylen Waddle a run for his money.
And I don't think he's that bad of a player. Like he's going to have negative again. Obviously, that's just kind of a hilarious thing that happened. But I mean, yeah, you cannot have a worse game.
Yeah, okay. I'm changing my answer because, again, if I'm going to be lower on Hopkins because of the Denver matchup, then I can't say that, Worthy, he's a great start.
But again, so, I do. I mean, Denver got roasted last week, so I wonder.
I think that your
point, just the Ravens are a different kind of machine?
I think your point is interesting to bring up, how you saw the Chiefs offense pop off in a really good matchup, and you saw the Broncos defense really struggle in a really tough matchup. So do they kind of regress to what we've seen more of, or does this say, hey, the Denver Broncos defense is now just horrible because they played the Ravens? Or I guess I would probably say like it's more likely the Chiefs are building momentum. That would make more sense to me than the Broncos being this. Oh, now they're just they're a sieve defense. I don't think that's probably the case.
I do a fantasy segment for a local TV station because I live here in Denver, and each week I have to kind of break down from a fantasy perspective the Broncos matchup. And this week I actually said I was like, I just want to see what happens. Like, this is the week I feel the least confident because, like, we saw what the Broncos defense was before week 9. We saw what the Chiefs offense was before week 9. I don't really know what to expect this week. So, like I said before, I'm more just kind of curious to see what happens with them. Let's go to one last flex start-sit decision. Tyler Allgeier or Jordan Addison? Fitz, who do you like better?
Allgeier. He doesn't have much standalone value as sort of the backup to Bijan Robinson, unless he has a good matchup. He is a really good matchup this week. He's going against the Saints, who have their 31st in DVOA against the run. And the last time Allgeier faced the Saints back in week 4, he had 80 yards from scrimmage. So I'll take him over Addison. 4.7 targets a game this season for Addison. And that's been without TJ Hawkinson, who came back last week and is going to further cut into Addison's target total. So just not enough usage for Addison, I think, for me to start him over a running back who's going to get carries and has a really good matchup. Erickson,
who do you prefer?
I feel like Addison does have some ceiling potential against the Jags secondary, a lot of man coverage. So I know he doesn't necessarily see a ton of volume, but the fact that you're going to probably see Mac Jones, and is this a game that's going to shoot out? I don't think so. I think this is a game that the Vikings can pretty easily dominate. Feed Aaron Jones, feed Justin Jefferson, and then what if TJ Hawkinson the Jaguars, one of the things that you target is tight ends with them. So maybe this is more of a Hawkinson game and not really an Addison spot. So I think that Allgeier, the yards from scrimmage are going to be there. Obviously, it comes down to if he scores, then you're feeling great about starting him. I think that's really where his upside is with a touchdown. But we've seen the Falcons at least entertain him enough in the red zone, and especially if they are running circles around the New Orleans Saints, you could probably see Allgeier get a lot of work in the second half. So I'm going to pivot to Allgeier as well.
Let's do a quarterback one. A couple of names of quarterbacks that we all believe in are good players, but for fantasy this season have not quite lived up to that. Justin Herbert or CJ Stroud? Fitz, I'll start with you. Who do you prefer in week 10, Herbert or Stroud?
Herbert by a country mile. Like, not even close. Over the first 4 weeks of the season, Herbert averaged 144.5 passing yards. And it looked like it was just going to be a disaster of a season for him under Greg Roman. Over his last 4 games, he's nearly doubled that yardage total with 286.8 passing yards a game. He averaged 22.8 pass attempts over those first 4 games, 33 pass attempts over his last 4. Herbert just wasn't totally healthy early in the season. He was dealing with plantar fasciitis. He's seemingly healthy now, playing really well. Home matchup against the Titans. I know the Titans defense on paper, it's been okay, but I don't think they're going to have L'Jarius Sneed again this week. So I don't think this is a matchup to fear. Not clear if the Texans are getting Nico Collins back. And if they don't, I'm going to have him outside the top 20. I have him at 23 right now at quarterback, based on the assumption Nico's not coming back because we have not seen them officially reopen the practice window for him. So, with Nico out, Stroud has thrown for under 200 yards in 3 of 4 games, and he's averaging 1 touchdown pass a game over those 4. And the Texans' offensive line is completely collapsed. Last we saw them, it was Halloween night against the Jets. CJ Stroud got sacked 8 times by the Jets that night. So, I don't want to start Stroud. And even if Nico comes back, I'm going to have Stroud well below Justin Herbert in my rankings.
They're back-to-back in ECR. Stroud's actually 1 spot ahead, QB 17, Herbert's QB 18. It sounds like from, talking about this being like a country mile gap for you, Fitz, it sounds like that's more about your optimism for Herbert and less about your pet. It seems like how you feel about Stroud is closer to where consensus sees it, even if you are still a bit below consensus, whereas Herbert, you're just significantly above consensus.
Yeah, it's both. And I think people are still kind of spooked by the lack of production for Herbert early in the season, but things have totally changed now. And I know we can't count on Greg Roman turning into Bill Walsh all of a sudden as a play caller. Like, we're not going to see things totally open up and Herbert throwing 40 or 50 times a game, but it's a lot more unbuckled than it was early in the season.
His QB finishes, Herbert, by the way, before the week 5 bye, QB 24, 23, 28, 22, and 2 of those were against the Steelers and Chiefs, who are very good defenses. Since the bye, QB 21, also against a really good defense against Denver, and then QB 17, 9, and 12. So it definitely has been trending in the direction we want to see. Erickson, who do you prefer between Stroud and Herbert this week?
Well, I mean, Fitz, the country mile has made me really rethink because I was going to come to the table and say, well, I mean, if Collins plays, just play Stroud, right? I thought it was kind of, simple as that, but maybe I wasn't giving enough credit to Herbert and the fact that
Erickson, have conviction in your opinion. Don't let Fitz change your mind so easily.
I come on the show so that I'm ultimately right at the end of the day. I don't care how I get there. Fitz is a smart guy. He's ahead of me in the rankings, so why would I not pay attention to what he has to say?
By that logic, then we should have Mike Mayer on the show because he's top 10 on the year.
Mike Mayer, his strategy, just try to be the least wrong with my rankings every week, and it works out for him. Herbert, the fact that they've been throwing more, the Titans are more of a pass funnel defense because they're high stuff rate, they stack the box. So, and the Chargers have shown, hey, if we get favorable looks in the passing game, like, we're going to throw it. So, I mean, I thought that with Collins back, I feel confident, but maybe I think, Fitz, you've kind of convinced me otherwise, where maybe we need to see it first with Stroud, with this offensive line playing a little bit better again as the Detroit Lions. So you're thinking, oh, like, this game will be a shootout. But what if it's just the Lions just totally destroy the Houston Texans? I think that's the issue in that particular matchup. So, I think I'm going to go with Herbert here, ride the wave.
It can't be understated how bad Houston's offensive line has been like the last 3 weeks or so. I think it started with that game against the Packers up in Green Bay, where Green Bay's pressure rate that week was like 62.8% or something crazy, which to that point had been like the highest recorded pressure rate by any team over any game. And then I think the next week, the Texans gave up a pressure rate over 50% again, and then they gave up 8 sacks in the game after that. Like, that offensive line just hasn't been able to protect Stroud at all. So the recent struggles for Stroud, totally not his fault. I mean, he's got all these wide receiver injuries, and his offensive line has just been a complete sieve.
Also, are we sure that Collins is coming back? Because he didn't practice Wednesday, right? I know the quotes have been like he hasn't had any kind of setback or anything, and this was the target date all along. But he's even been designated to return from IR yet.
Has not.
I don't think he has. Yeah. So I mean, we're sitting here Thursday morning and haven't been given an indication that he is going to play yet. So, I mean, that to me, that goes a long way also in terms of this.
Also, ranking. They play Sunday night. So if it's a game time decision and then it's like, well, do I play Herbert? You just play Herbert, in that situation. And then, because again, I agree that especially if Collins doesn't play, I think it is the country mile that Fitz alluded to. I thought it was closer with Nico Collins playing, but Fitz says, once again,
how far is a country mile, by the way? Is it longer than a regular mile?
Erickson thought it was more of a city mile, but
is this like the Baker's dozen thing?
Country mile, I believe, is 1.62 miles.
Okay, so I don't live in the country mile high city.
Country mile high. Wait, there's got to be. Wait, is Denver the highest point? Not in Colorado. Wait, where would that be? In the mountains? Is that how you get
Colorado is one of the 14ers that you could hike. Yeah, I would. I mean, I don't know off the top of my head what it is, but yeah, Denver is a mile high. Yeah, some of those are 14,000 feet high.
Is there a particular part in Denver that's higher than the rest that you can kind of get?
The west part of the state is the mountain.
So that's the country.
The Rocky Mountains is going to be your answer there.
I'd love to visit you someday, Worm, but I don't want to go anywhere where I'm going to need an oxygen mask after I go up a flight of stairs.
When I first moved here, I lived on the second floor of an apartment, and I was moving a couch up those stairs, and I was like, this might have been a mistake. I have friends who they will get sick driving in from the airport from the altitude sickness. I had another friend who tried to hike a 14er a month after living here and actually had to go to the doctor's office and get oxygen because it was your body just hasn't gotten used to it yet. So it's no joke. I've had people do bachelor parties out here, and I'm drink as much water as humanly possible because you will feel the effects. All right, let's do a tight end start sit here. Evan Ingram or TJ Hawkinson? Erickson, who do you like?
Hawkinson. I think that the matchup is great against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think he'll play a little bit more than he did last week, another week back into the offense. And Evan Ingram is Trevor Lawrence's guy. I don't know if he's Mac Jones's guy. So even if he's the underneath main target without Trevor Lawrence, I lose confidence in starting Evan Ingram. Again, I am projecting that the volume will be there, but I can't say for sure. So whereas Hawkinson, I want to chase the matchup. I think he has a higher ceiling.
Fitz, who do you like?
Yeah, if Lawrence was going to play in this game, I would have Ingram ranked higher, but I think if he's out and Mac Jones plays, I will have Hawk ranked a little bit higher.
Say goodbye to start-sit dilemmas with FantasyPros start-sit assistant. Within seconds, you'll know exactly who to play for optimal results each and every week. Leveraging insights from numerous experts, the start-sit assistant aligns your lineup decisions with the top minds in fantasy football, giving you a competitive edge. Maximize your lineup's potential with just a few clicks. Head to fantasypros.com/myplaybook and make winning decisions in no time. All right, guys, let's wrap up with our touchdown calls contest. Erickson, you are on running back this week.
Tyrone Tracy Jr. playing the Carolina Panthers, giving up 15 touchdowns running backs this year. Guys, it's week 10. They've given up 15 touchdowns already. So I think Devin Singletary could score. Tyrone Tracy could score. Love the Giants running backs this week. Let's go.
Fitz, you're on wide receiver.
Khalil Shakir hasn't scored a touchdown since week 3, and the Bills can be very egalitarian with the way they distribute touchdown passes. Josh Allen has thrown a TD pass to 10 different players this season, but I just have a feeling that we're going to see Khalil Shakir get off the schneid with touchdowns this week and score one.
I'm going to ride the Cade Otton train at tight end as long as I can. 4 touchdowns across the last 4 weeks. He's tight end 3 in ECR right now. Just a remarkable rise with this newfound opportunity with all the injuries there. So we've got Tyrone Tracy Jr. at running back, Khalil Shakir at receiver, and Cade Otton at tight end. We will wrap up there for Fitz and Erickson. I am Ryan Wormeli. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and best of luck in Week 10.